Today we're talking about something that looks like productivity but is actually performance. You're not being productive, you're performing safety, and that performance is costing you everything. If you're someone who looks busy all the time, if you can account for every hour of your day with tasks and activities, if people perceive you as hardworking and driven, but nothing meaningful ever actually gets finished, if you feel exhausted at the end of the day but can't point to tangible progress, then what I'm about to tell you will explain everything. Because you're not struggling with productivity. You're struggling with something far more fundamental. You're addicted to the feeling of control that comes from doing safe tasks. And safety is the enemy of execution. Let me paint you a specific picture. It's Monday morning. You sit down to work on the thing that actually matters, the project that could change your trajectory, the work that requires real skill, the output that will get judged, and immediately your nervous system activates. You feel resistance, discomfort, a low-level anxiety. So you do something, but not the thing that matters. You check email, you organize your files, you update your to-do list, you research best practices, you attend a meeting that could have been an email, you respond to messages, you optimize your workspace, you plan your week, you consume content related to your industry, you take a course on a skill you might need someday, and at the end of the day, you're exhausted. You've been working for 10 hours straight, but the important project hasn't moved. The output you were supposed to create doesn't exist, but you feel productive. You feel like you accomplished something. You feel like you were busy and engaged and working hard, and that feeling is the trap. Because what you did wasn't productivity, it was performance. You performed the role of a productive person. You acted out busy. You created the appearance of progress. But underneath all that activity, nothing real happened. Psychologist Steven Pressfield calls this resistance. He wrote about it extensively in his work on creative execution. He identified that the human nervous system has a sophisticated system for protecting us from risk, and that system doesn't distinguish between physical risk and ego risk. When you sit down to do something real, something that will be judged, something that could fail, your nervous system activates the same threat response it would activate if you were facing a predator. So it creates resistance, and resistance feels like legitimate reasons to do something else. Legitimate reasons that your rational mind accepts. You need to check email. You need to stay organized. You need to prepare. You need to learn more first. These all sound reasonable, but they're not. They're your nervous system's way of protecting your ego from the risk of failure. But here's where it gets more specific to how intelligent people operate. Intelligent people have an additional layer of justification for safety performance. You can convince yourself that the safe activities are actually productive. That organizing is preparation. That research is progress. That planning is execution. That learning is growth. And because you're articulate and intelligent, you can construct elaborate explanations for why these activities matter. You can convince other people they matter. You can convince yourself they matter. But somewhere deep down, you know they don't. You know that none of this is moving you toward the goal. You're just creating the appearance of movement. Psychologist Brené Brown studied this in her research on vulnerability and courage. She found that people often confuse vulnerability avoidance with productivity. We're so afraid of being exposed, of putting something out there that could be judged, of being wrong in public, that we perform activity instead. We stay safe in the realm of preparation, planning, and learning, because those things can never truly fail. They never expose us. Brown wrote, "Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change, but vulnerable activities are terrifying. So we avoid them. And we call the avoidance productivity." Here's what's really happening in your nervous system. Your brain has learned that certain activities are safe. Research is safe because it's infinite and never has to be finished. Planning is safe because it's never judged on execution. Learning is safe because it's about acquiring, not performing. Organizing is safe because it has clear metrics and completion. Responding to messages is safe because the feedback is immediate and doesn't threaten your core identity. And your brain has learned that other activities are dangerous. Creating is dangerous because it exposes your thinking. Shipping is dangerous because it invites judgment. Reaching out is dangerous because it risks rejection. Starting is dangerous because it requires moving with incomplete information, so your nervous system steers you towards safe activities, not consciously, neurologically. It generates a steady stream of reasons why the safe activities are actually what you should be doing right now. The small tasks that feel urgent, the email that needs a response, the administrative work that needs to be handled, the learning that will make you better prepared. And because you're moving constantly, because you're busy, because you have legitimate tasks to complete, you feel productive. Your nervous system feels like it's working, Your body feels engaged. You're getting hits of dopamine from completing small tasks, from checking things off lists, from handling the immediate and urgent. But you're not getting anywhere, and somewhere deep down, you know it. Psychologist Roy Baumeister studied something called ego depletion. He found that our willpower, our capacity for difficult mental work, is limited, and that when we spend our willpower on anxiety management activities, on nervous system regulation, on self-protection, we have nothing left for real work. In other words, all the energy you're spending performing safety, all the mental effort going into justifying why the safe activities matter, all the willpower being used to manage your anxiety about the real work, that's energy that's not available for execution. You're not tired from working hard. You're tired from protecting yourself from working hard. This is why people who look the busiest are often the least productive. They're not failing due to lack of effort. They're failing because they're spending all their effort on safety performance. They're running on the treadmill at maximum speed but getting nowhere. Let me give you a specific example of how this shows up. You're a writer. You want to write a book, so you do everything except write the book. You research publishing. You study successful authors. You take writing courses. You read books on craft. You attend conferences. You build a platform. You outline the book. You plan the book. You think deeply about the book. You talk about the book. But you don't write the book. And when someone asks why, you have perfect explanations. I'm still researching. I need to understand the market better. I want to study the craft more before I start. I'm still figuring out the structure. I need to build my platform first so I have an audience when I launch. All of these sound reasonable. All of these sound like you're being productive. But you're not. You're performing the role of someone preparing to write a book. You're not actually writing, because writing is vulnerable. Writing is exposed. Writing is real. Writing can fail. And your nervous system will do literally anything to keep you out of that space. Here's what this does to your actual execution. You end up in a state of perpetual preparation. You're always getting ready to start the real work. You're always one more course away from being ready. One more certification away, one more book read away, one more skill developed away. But the real work never starts. Because starting would mean risking exposure. And this becomes your identity. You're the person who's studying to be a writer, not the writer. You're the person who's preparing to start the business, not the entrepreneur. You're the person who's learning to create, not the creator. You're in eternal preparation mode. And preparation mode is safe. It's predictable. It has clear metrics of success. It never exposes you. But it also guarantees that you'll never actually become the thing you're preparing to be, because becoming requires doing, and doing is the one thing your nervous system won't let you do. So here's what needs to happen. You need to recognize the difference between productive activity and productive outcome. Productive activity is what your nervous system wants. It's controllable. It's safe. It generates the feeling of progress without the risk of failure. Productive outcome is what your goals require. It's uncertain. It's risky. It generates real progress, but also real exposure. And right now, you're choosing activity every single time, not because you're lazy, but because your nervous system is smarter than your willpower. And it knows that activity feels like productivity while keeping you safe. So you need to make a conscious choice. You need to decide what's actually productive for your goals. Not for your nervous system, not for your ego, for your actual goals. And then you need to do that thing even though it feels wrong, even though it feels unproductive, even though your brain generates 100 reasons why you should do something else first. Because here's the truth. The most productive thing you can do is the thing your nervous system is trying hardest to keep you from doing. That's the thing that matters. That's the thing that moves the needle. That's the thing that scares you because it's real. So you identify one thing you've been performing preparation for, one area where you're busy but not progressing, and you stop preparing. You start doing, today, not perfectly, not with all the knowledge you think you need, just doing. You don't need one more course. You don't need to research more. You don't need to plan more. You need to create something real, something that can be judged, something that can fail, something that requires you to be vulnerable instead of just busy. Because here's what happens when you finally do the real work. It's harder than the safe work. It's more uncomfortable. It generates more anxiety. But it also generates real progress, real evidence, real identity change, real proof that you're actually pursuing the goal, not just performing the pursuit. And once you taste that, once you experience what real productivity feels like, the safe activities lose their power. Because you realize they were never about productivity. They were about protection. And protection is the opposite of progress. If this explained why you're busy but not progressing, subscribe. Next time, we're breaking down the psychology of why you're more committed to your obstacles than you are to your goals, and why that's the real reason nothing changes.